In a fantasy realm, a man reincarnates as a sword and teaches a young beastkin girl. A flashback shows how the sword died and how he reacts to being reincarnated in another world as a pedestal-mounted weapon. A voice in the sword's mind tells him he's in for a rough time before leaving. Despite wanting answers, the blade dismisses the speaker as a hallucination and recognizes that he would cheat in an isekai scenario. He immediately checks his menu and discovers he's an intelligent weapon. He says the sword matches his talents and abilities and looks like an RPG's final sword. A tiny group of goblins tries to pull him off his perch. The sword uses telekinesis to kill 2 goblins when provoked. The sword slices a crystal within a goblin, letting him absorb its power inadvertently. The sword checked his stats menu after finishing the goblin pack. After defeating the goblins, he has 3 of 100 crystals and skill slots with new skills. The sword hears a female voice tell him he has 10 skill slots and asks whether he wants to equip any after realizing he can absorb skills from vanquished enemies. Before that, the sword stabs a goblin corpse and absorbs its crystal and 2 skills. After burying the goblin pack, the sword returns to his sword mount. The blade seeks to find a good master and absorb additional crystals and skills. A young black cat girl works with a bunch of slaves under her slave trader owner and notes her desire to become stronger. As his MP runs out, the sword utilizes telekinesis to fly for 3 minutes. The sword fights an air floater, which constricts him and drains his MP. He frees himself from the air floater's tentacles and kills it, absorbing its crystal. He notices float when the sword absorbs 3 new talents. He kills a monster centipede using this skill, and telekinesis to fly 5 times longer. The sword receives 10 evolution points and is informed that his abilities have evolved. The sword gains improved MP1 and improved attack 1 with 5 skill points each. Though happy to have 2 new skills, the sword laments not having a user. The sword finds a goblin nest cave that evening and kills most of the goblins inside and out, learning new talents. The stealth sword finds the goblin king encircled by goblins at the cave's darkest area. The sword promptly kills the goblin king and all the goblins with his telekinesis catapult strike, then discovers his sword mastery is level 3. Happy again that his wielder would be impressed by his skills. The black cat girl is ordered to stand down after saving another slave from a flogging by an overseer. She's reprimanded and denied food for disobeying. The next morning, the black cat girl tries to retaliate again, but her overseer orders her down. Later, she and the other slaves travel a wagon through a forest while the black cat girl sings she'll get stronger and evolve. The sword on his pedestal symbolizes how creatures get stronger as he gets farther from the area. He's defeated all the creatures in Area 4, the highest of 5 areas. The sword uses his telekinesis catapult and wind shooter powers, Heavenly Slash, to vanquish the Area 5 boss, a gluttonous slime. He gains 30 EP and new talents, including Insta Region 1. It costs a lot of MP to regenerate him instantly. The sword then uses the pocket dimension to swiftly store the gluttonous slime's corpse. Then fight the eastern boss, the Doppel Snake, and gain its doppelganger ability, which disappointed him. He next fights Area 5's northern boss, a blast turtle, and utilizes split thinking to increase his earth magic. He overcomes the blast turtle with Earth Wall and Heavenly Slash and receives 2 new skills. Next day, the sword fights Area 5's western boss, Tyrant Sabertooth. The sword enhances its superior Poison Fang to Demonic Poison Fang and exploits its poison weakness for 15 EP. After fighting the enemy, evolves again, gaining stats. The sword enters the forest outside Area 5 to fight bigger enemies. When the sword plants himself into the ground, he discovers that it absorbed his MP and becomes stuck. He desperately maxes out his cooking and fire talents during his month there, pleading for rescue regardless of race. He also raises his wielder stats boost to 2. As it rains, the blade laments his condition. A twin-headed bear attacked the black cat girl and slave's cart. It smashes the wagon and kills slaves and an overseer. The black cat girl hits the creature with a stick, but its power overwhelms her. The sword summons the black cat, who defeats the twin-headed bear. After this, the slave trader tries to convince the black cat to give up the sword, but he kills him and burns the collar contract. Since no black cat has evolved, the black cat agrees to wield the sword to evolve. The sword agrees to train and assists the black cat after being moved by her story. Fran, the black cat girl, names the sword teacher, mostly because he promised to strengthen her. Fran rests next to teacher on a wagon to a stone-walled city where a swarm of goblins plan to invade. Fran's background and desire to evolve are described by teacher, despite the fact that the black cat tribe has never been able to evolve. Fran uses water magic to clean herself after defeating a swarm of goblins, followed by teacher with the goblin blood stains. Fran then hears something and rushes to the scene, ignoring teacher's plea to find out what's wrong. An adventurer named Randall struggles to protect a merchant wagon that is surrounded by a large group of goblins. Fran arrives on the scene and quickly eliminates the goblins while the lead goblin flees. Randall thanks Fran for her assistance and offers her a ride to Alessa. Teacher sees the offer as a way for Fran to assist him in protecting the wagon until they arrive at their destination. However, he believes Randall is a good guy in general and has Fran accept the offer. Randall tells Fran about the increase in monster encounters in the Great Wolf Plain as they travel to their destination. There was apparently a turf war there, causing weaker monsters like goblins to seek refuge along busy roads. Hearing this, Teacher concludes that his antics in the area have recently caused trouble. Fran then inquires if Randall is aware of a plain sword implanted in the area. However, Randall is unaware, much to Teacher's dismay. Randall then asks Fran if she is a G-ranked adventurer, which confuses her and Teacher. As a result, Randall explains the monster ranking system to her and those who hunt monsters, adventurers. Randall then explains the concept of adventurers and names a few famous ones. Randall explains that if Fran wants to become an adventurer, she must first register at the Adventurers Guild, where she can sell her monster materials. Elsewhere, the goblin leader who fled after Fran's arrival returns to its base, where a goblin shaman summons various species of goblins and begins to mutate in the process. Back at Fran's side, the wagon arrives in Alessa, and as Fran makes her way to the Adventurers Guild, Teacher casts Identify on the adventurer's weapons. To his surprise, all of the weapons were much stronger than he was, and he becomes depressed. Fran then cheers up Teacher by praising him, which lifts his spirits, and they proceed to the Adventurers Guild. Nell, the guild's receptionist, struggles to maintain a cheerful demeanor while dealing with the adventurer's obnoxious behavior. Fran then approaches Nell and requests to register as an adventurer. While Nell believes Fran is unfit to be an adventurer, she agrees to let her take the mock fight exam. Donadron, the examiner, leads Fran to an arena and introduces himself to her in a loud, boisterous voice, using his intimidation skill. Teacher is astounded by Donadron's strength, as the ogre prepares for the fight ahead after casting Identify on him. Fran is having trouble defending herself against Donadron's attacks at the start of the fight, so Teacher casts support buffs on her, temporarily increasing her STR and AGL. Fran finishes the fight with a Dragon Fang attack thanks to the buffs, and the combination of earth and fire magic. Fran passes the exam by defeating Donadron. Fran then meets with Guildmaster Klimt in his office, accompanied by Donadron. Klimt tries to learn from Fran, where she learned her sword skills and spells, but she refuses to answer, following Teacher's advice. Klimt attempts to use Identify on Fran, but it is rejected due to Teacher's Identify protection. Klimt assures Fran that she has passed as the spirits are calm. She is curious what would happen if she failed. The Teacher then uses Identify to learn about Klimt's impressive stats and skills. Just then, Nell enters the room and informs him that everything is in order, and Klimt authorizes Fran's guild card to be issued. A large crystal sits on a pedestal in the center of a room with stone-carved faces on the walls. Fran records her mana signature on the crystal before selecting Spellsword as her class. After that, Nell hands Fran her guild card, and Fran returns to the receptionist's desk to turn in some of her monster materials for a profit of 195k gold. A quartet of adventurers attempt to extort money from Fran as she attempts to ignore them. Nell intervenes and disparages the group. One of the members attacks Nell, but Fran saves her, and Teacher suggests they take the fight outside, but the adventurers block the way. One of the adventurers mocks Fran for being from the Black Cat tribe, which irritates her and causes her to sever the adventurer's feet. She then uses Oscillation to eliminate the remaining adventurers. Fran then leaves the guild, but a dwarf uses God's Sight on Teacher to determine that he's an intelligent weapon. As Fran with Teacher on her back explore the stalls around Alessa seeking equipment, they are approached by the dwarf whose name is Garrus, who suggests they visit his shop for some equipment. Teacher casts Identify on Garrus to learn his name, stats, and skills and is impressed by them. Following Teacher's advice, Fran decides to go with Garrus to his shop. On their way to the shop, two men chastise Fran and Envy for being allowed to do business with Garrus, but he reveals they plan to resell his gear, and refuses to do business with such men. A curious Fran then asks Garrus why he'd refuse to do business with the two scornful men, and yet do it with her. Garrus then claims he was impressed with how she handled the men in the guild and would happily conduct business with her. In Garrus' shop, Fran tries on the equipment that Garrus offers her, and Teacher was impressed by their stats boosts and skills. Despite his continuous self-consciousness over how the swords in the city are more robust than he is, Teacher suggests that they investigate what swords the shop has to offer. Surprised that Fran would want to see his swords, Garrus then reveals that he knows Teacher is actually an intelligent weapon. Alerted by this, Fran takes a side step backward as Teacher tries to deduce how Garrus was privy to his identity. Garrus then laughs and reveals that he has an extra skill called God Eyes that allows him to see past identity protection. Using his God Eyes again, Garrus appraises Teacher and notes that his skills are far more impressive than the other swords he has seen, which causes Teacher to blurt something out telepathically. Garrus picks up on this, and Teacher scornfully curses, but Garrus assures Teacher that he only wishes to have a chat as an intrigued blacksmith. He then mentions that after seeing what Teacher was, Garrus notes that Fran doesn't have to have another sword. However, Teacher points out that one of Garrus' swords is stronger than him. To that point, Garrus notes that although it has higher ATK power than Teacher, he then mentions that Teacher probably doesn't know about mana conductivity. To demonstrate the difference between the two, Garrus retrieves the sword with 450 ATK from the wall, and asks that Fran unravel Teacher, endow him with 100 mana points, and attack the sword. Fran does so, and the 450 ATK sword breaks with a single swipe. Garrus then reveals that Teacher's mana conductivity was A, meaning he has 200% mana efficiency, and should be able to charge up to 1k mana without any trouble. Teacher deduces that his attack power would be over 2k if he uses a max of 1k mana, and Garrus praises him as one of the most impressive enchanted swords. Hearing this causes both Fran and Teacher to have a bonding moment that irks Garrus, who then inquires who originally forged Teacher. However, Teacher has no clue who may have forged him and asks if Garrus God Eye could elaborate. On the other hand, Garrus details that someone of Garrus' smithing capability couldn't forge him. However, he notes that perhaps a godsmith could. Garrus then details the history of a godsmith, and how they can forge swords called divine swords, of which Teacher is not one. Furthermore, Garrus explains that the only divine sword he's ever seen was called Ignis. Thankful for what Garrus has told him thus far, Teacher requests that Garrus create a sheath for him with the monster material he's collected. Unloading his collection of monster material onto the flustered Garrus, he informs Teacher that the material provided come from D and C ranked monsters. Garrus offers to create it for free. Told by Garrus that it'll take 3 days for the sheath and a month for him to complete the armor, Fran and Teacher leave Garrus' shop. While walking the streets of Alessa, Teacher asks if Fran needs panties, to which she informs him that they're unnecessary. A lady admonishes that notion and insists they visit her shop. Inside the place, the shopkeeper shows Fran an assortment of panties to choose from as well as dresses. Following the advice of the shopkeeper, Fran and Teacher head to the general store owned by a towering man called Rufus. After Teacher uses Identify on Rufus, it's learned that his STR is 150, and Fran asks him if he's an adventurer, whereas Rufus claims he retired and opened up the shop 3 years ago they're in now. Hence, Fran purchases a bunch of cooking supplies from the shop, and after they find an inn to stay at for the night, Teacher makes fried chicken for Fran. Once Fran finished her dinner and was dressed in her pajamas, Teacher allocated his EP to healing magic before they went to bed, to be better prepared for the battles ahead of them. Unbeknownst to them, a horde of goblins emerge from a cave. The following day, Fran and Teacher find some heelgrass in a local forest used as an ingredient in potions. They then find a fruit used to cure poison and then some stamina shrooms, which are good for cooking. Because they were G-ranked adventurers, tasks like herb collecting were common, as were subjugating monsters such as a few goblin. Fran then hears the voices of adventurers in trouble and heads to their location and finds the adventurers Lily, Krull, and Eustace surrounded by 13 goblins. Arriving at the scene, Teacher spots that some of the goblins are hobgoblins. Hence, Fran decides to rush in and assist the adventurers and defeats 3 of them with a fire spell. To prevent another unintentional bonfire that Fran created in the forest, Teacher advises that she use earth magic instead. So both Fran and Teacher, respectively, cast Stone Arrow and Stone Bullet against the goblins, taking out a few of them in the first volley. Fran then defeats a couple of the goblins with Double Slash, and Teacher uses Stone Bullet against one, allowing Fran to level up to 4. She then finishes all of the goblins with Teacher's Stone Bullet and Heavy Slash. Once that was done, Fran approached the adventurers and cast Circle Healing on them, and, as her reward, Fran agreed to take the hobgoblin material. When Eustace mentions the appearance of hobgoblins signals a goblin stampede, and ignorant Fran and Teacher learn what it is from the adventurers. After the explanation, a single goblin signals its comrades, and Teacher takes it out with a stone bullet. With more goblins on the way, Fran has the adventurers return to Alessa to warn them about the upcoming goblin stampede as she deals with the incoming goblin. In doing so, Fran levels up to 8, and despite being surrounded and outnumbered by the goblins, she refuses to give in to them all.